they laughed at him in the streets. Not the gentle kind of laughter, but the sharp, echoing kind that sticks to your skin long after the sound fades. And yet, just a few minutes from now, you'll understand why the same voice they mocked would silence an entire auditorium, bring judges to their feet, and change one life forever. So stay with me until the end, because this story proves that dreams don't need permission to come true. And if stories like this move your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because moments like these deserve to be shared. His name was Miguel Santos, a skinny Filipino kid from a crowded neighborhood where houses leaned on each other like tired old friends. Every morning, Miguel pushed a rusty cart through the streets, selling cheap snacks just to help his mother keep the lights on. But what made people notice him wasn't the cart, it was the singing. He sang while walking, sang while working, sang when he thought no one was listening. And he sang like Elvis. Not as a joke, not to be funny, but because Elvis made him feel alive. His hips swayed naturally, his voice slipped into that familiar vibrato, and for a few seconds, the cracked pavement beneath his feet turned into a stage. That was when the laughter came. Kids mimicked his moves. Adults shook their heads. Some shouted, "Hey Elvis, go back to reality." Others tossed coins not out of kindness, but mockery. Miguel learned to smile through it, though every laugh landed like a small stone on his chest. At night, when the streets went quiet, he practiced in front of a broken mirror, imagining bright lights instead of flickering bulbs, cheers instead of laughter. His mother would sit nearby, exhausted from work, pretending not to cry as she watched her son chase a dream the world kept stepping on. There were days Miguel almost quit. Days when his voice cracked from exhaustion, when his cart felt heavier than usual, when he wondered if the streets were right about him. But then he would remember his father, who used to play old Elvis songs on a second-hand radio before he passed away. "Sing like you mean it," his father once said. "Even if no one's listening yet." That yet became Miguel's anchor. One afternoon, a stranger stopped him mid-song. Miguel braced himself for another joke. Instead, the man asked, "Have you ever thought about auditioning?" Miguel laughed bitterly. Auditioning for what? But the man showed him a video on his phone. America's Got Talent. Big stage. Big dreams. Golden buzzers. Miguel's heart raced. It sounded impossible, expensive, ridiculous. But that night, he couldn't sleep. The idea burned brighter than fear. Getting there was a battle of its own. Neighbors said it was a waste of time. Relatives warned him not to embarrass the family. Money was scarce, and doubt was everywhere. But his mother sold her old ring, the last thing she owned of value, and placed the money in his hand. "Go," she said softly. "If they laugh, let them. At least you tried." Miguel hugged her, shaking, promising he'd come back stronger no matter what happened. The day of the audition, Miguel stood backstage trembling. Contestants around him warmed up with confidence, designer clothes, polished voices. He wore a borrowed jacket and shoes slightly too big. His hands were cold. When his name was called, he walked out, lights blinding him, judges staring. A few murmurs rippled through the audience when he introduced himself. A street singer. An Elvis impersonator. The laughter threatened to return. Then the music started. Miguel closed his eyes. He wasn't in that massive theater anymore. He was back on the streets, back with his father, back in front of the cracked mirror. He sang like his life depended on it. Every note carried years of ridicule, sacrifice, and stubborn hope. His voice filled the room raw, powerful, unmistakably his own. The laughter died. Jaws dropped. One judge leaned forward. Another's eyes filled with tears. By the final note, the room was silent for a heartbeat that felt like forever. Then the explosion came. The crowd rose to its feet, screaming, clapping, chanting. Miguel opened his eyes, stunned, breathless. The judges praised not just his voice, but his courage, his soul. And then, as the cheers grew louder, one judge slammed their hand on the golden buzzer. Gold confetti rained from the ceiling as Miguel fell to his knees, sobbing. The boy they laughed at in the streets had just earned a moment the world could never take away. Back home, the streets were different. Not because they changed, but because Miguel had. He returned not as a joke, not as a dreamer to be mocked, but as proof. Proof that ridicule is often just fear in disguise. Proof that talent doesn't need approval to exist. Proof that the same streets that laughed can one day whisper your name in awe. Miguel's journey didn't end with that buzzer, it began there. But the real victory wasn't the stage, the lights, or the applause. It was the fact that he never stopped singing, even when no one believed in him. And maybe that's why this story matters. Because somewhere right now, someone is laughing at your dream. Someone is telling you to be realistic, to quiet down, to fit in. Don't. If a Filipino street singer who sounded like Elvis could turn laughter into standing ovations, imagine what's possible for you. If this story inspired you even a little, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Because dreams don't die from failure, they die from silence. And as long as you keep singing, your moment may be closer than you think. Microphone sparkles, they pointed at him. They laughed out loud. Some even followed him down the street just to watch him fail. But what none of them knew was that the same man they mocked would soon stand on the biggest stage in the world, press his pain into a microphone, and make history. Watch until the very end, because this story isn't just about talent, it's about survival, faith, and the moment when laughter turns into silence. And if stories that inspire you to never give up mean something to you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, because your support helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. His real name was Daniel Reyes, but the streets didn't care to learn it. To them, he was just Elvis, the poor Filipino man with worn-out shoes and a voice that didn't seem to belong where he was standing. Every afternoon, Daniel sang on the sidewalks of Manila, outside jeepney stops and busy markets, where life moved too fast for dreams. He sang because singing was the only thing that made the hunger fade, the grief soften, the loneliness quiet down. Elvis Presley's songs were his escape, his shield, his reminder that someone else once came from nothing and became everything. But the streets were cruel teachers. Teenagers recorded him on their phones while laughing. Vendors told him to move away. Strangers mocked his accent, his clothes, his hair. "You think you're Elvis?" they sneered. Daniel smiled anyway. He always smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, but because if he stopped smiling, he was afraid he might stop singing too. At night, Daniel returned to a small room he shared with his younger sister. Their parents were gone, lost to illness and bad luck, and Daniel had become everything at once: brother, provider, protector. He worked construction in the mornings, sang in the streets in the afternoons, and practiced endlessly at night. His sister would lie on the floor, listening quietly as he rehearsed the same songs over and over. "Kuya," she once said, "one day they won't laugh." Daniel nodded, though he didn't fully believe it yet. There was a moment when he almost gave up. One rainy evening, soaked and exhausted, Daniel sang to an empty street while people hurried past without looking. A group of men laughed and threw a crumpled bill at his feet. Something inside him cracked. He went home, sat in silence, and stared at the wall for hours. Dreams feel foolish when reality keeps winning. But then he remembered his mother's words from years ago: "God gives gifts, not guarantees." That night, Daniel decided that even if the world never listened, he would still sing. Everything changed with a single shared video. A tourist filmed Daniel singing "Can't Help Falling in Love" as traffic roared behind him. The video wasn't perfect. The sound was rough. The background was chaotic. But Daniel's voice, his emotion, cut through everything. Within days, millions had watched it. Comments poured in from all over the world. Why is this man on the streets? This voice deserves a stage. Someone tagged America's Got Talent. The idea felt impossible. Daniel didn't even own a passport. He had no money, no connections, no confidence that he belonged anywhere near a stage like that. But people started helping. Donations came in. Strangers believed when he barely could. When he finally boarded the plane, his hand shook the entire flight. He wasn't flying toward fame, he was flying toward judgment. Backstage at AGT, Daniel felt small. Everyone else seemed polished, trained, prepared. He was just a street singer with borrowed clothes and a lifetime of doubt.